Welcome back. The Florida Democratic Party is in a shambles. The National Party has made it clear they have written off Florida. No one is coming to their rescue. So what happens now? After the election, I spoke to Andrea Mercado, the executive director of Florida Rising.
We see that President Biden just lost the least amount of seats of any president since JFK in a midterm election. But here in Florida, we saw a very different story. We saw Governor DeSantis and reinstating Senator Marco Rubio, and some really hard losses down ballot as well, and in our state legislature. But the story of this election is really a story of Republicans investing heavily in Florida, and Florida essentially being abandoned by the National Democratic Party. There was a clear intentional decision to abandon Florida, and Democrats have a right to be very angry about that.
Well, it wasn't just a lack of investment. I mean, I guess that's part of the issue is the financial structure, but this has been trending this way for some time. I mean, let's just go through some of the numbers. Let's talk specifically about Hispanic voters. I mean, DeSantis won Hispanic voters by 15 or more points. He won Puerto Rican voters. So it wasn't just, conservative Cuban-American voters or even the growingly conservative, Venezuelan or Colombian voters. Why do you think Hispanic voters are trending more and more to the Republican Party?
That's a great question, and I think it is extremely alarming. But I think we can't ignore the fact that the Democratic infrastructure, like the Democratic Governors Association, Senate Majority PAC, all of that national Democratic infrastructure invested over $58 million in 2018. And only invested $1.3 million in 2022. You see Republicans outspending Democrats by over $250 million. And so what we see happening, and amongst Latino voters as well, is that Republicans are investing heavily in contesting for the hearts and minds and allegiance of Hispanic voters across the state, not just Cuban Americans, as you mentioned. And the Democratic Party is failing to invest in contesting for Latino communities and broadly. So we don't have a story of Democratic voters switching parties necessarily. What we see is Republicans supercharging their base. And we don't have the same level of organizing, investment that needs to be permanent, persistent, and strategic. And so when people are bombarded by Republican ideology, by disinformation, and by one side, and you don't have the same level of investment of people talking to new voters who need constant outreach to understand how their vote connects to meaningful change and where the candidates and political parties stand on the issues that matter to them, then we're going to see what happened in Florida this cycle.
Could it not just be something more simple? They like the way Governor DeSantis handled the pandemic. They like the strong presence, the authoritative tone of Governor DeSantis. They identify with that. They believe that what he's doing is a good job.
Well, I mean, certainly Latino community was disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And so, given that we disproportionately work in the service sector, in a lot, I think all of my cousins were laid off in Florida during the pandemic. And so it is undeniable that, DeSantis's keeping the economy open was a strong point for many Latinos. It was how they voted in 2020 and as a result in 2022, and it has to do with DeSantis's approval ratings. But at the same time, Latinos overwhelmingly agree with Democratic platform, with common sense gun control, overwhelmingly agree with measures to protect the environment, with women's rights, And when we look at the actions that President Biden and Democrats have taken to create 10 million jobs, to lower the unemployment rate, to have student loan relief of $10,000 to $20,000, which disproportionately impacts Black and Latino students who have more loans, or capping the price of insulin at $35 a month. There are a lot of actions that the Democratic Party has taken that Latinos actually really agree with. And I think the challenge is one of communication, because while every Republican in Congress will vote against many of these measures, the money that then comes to Florida, DeSantis claims it as one of his victories, when the reality is he had nothing to do with getting those resources into the state.
Democrats have relied for the past 20 years on a belief that demographics is destiny. That as older Cubans, for instance, either passed away or their children came of age, that the second generation of Hispanic immigrants were more likely to just naturally gravitate, maybe for some of the reasons you're saying, to the Democratic Party, but never made the effort to really make the case to Hispanic voters as to why they should be Democrats.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think there is absolutely a factor that the Democratic Party has taken Black and Latino voters and young voters for granted. And that's why Florida Rising, which is an independent political organization, does the work to communicate with Black and Latino communities about what are the issues that matter to them, and making sure that people are registering to vote and participating in our democratic process. And we see that democratic issues that are part of the Democratic platform are popular in Florida. We won Amendment 4, restoring the right to vote to returning citizens. We won the first $15 minimum wage in the South. Many of those issues, and yet oftentimes Democratic candidates don't fully stand behind those issues, and don't invest in Black and Latino communities and in young voters. Oftentimes there's an obsession with white working class voters or white suburban voters, as opposed to really focusing on mobilizing the new majority coalition that we know exists in Florida. I mean, there's 4 million people of color and young people in Florida that are eligible to vote and are not registered, or are registered and are sitting it out. And there has to be investment in organizing, in permanent communication to make sure that people come out and vote on election day, and understand that there are candidates that are going to fight for them up and down the ticket.
But you and I both know that the National Democratic Party not just wrote off Florida, in terms of their investment leading into this election, they've now written it off entirely. They do not see Florida as a competitive swing state, a purple state. The National Party sees it as solidly red. For presidential candidates on the Democratic side, they're going to invest in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin. That's the pathway that they're going to try to use in the future.
I think that, first of all, it's important for us to recognize that I don't see a path for Democrats long-term without a Senate seat from Florida. I don't see how the Democratic Party at a national level maintains a Senate majority without taking Florida seriously, without Florida's 30 electoral votes.
Well, wait a second. I just told you. I gave you the path. The path is going to be through Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin. That's the path that gets cited.
What happens when we lose Manchin? What happens when we lose some of these other states? It's not you can't only rely on Georgia and Michigan and Arizona. There comes a time where I think Democrats ignore the largest, most diverse battleground state at their own peril. Plus, Republicans.
Wait a second. You see, that's the problem. You just said the largest battleground state. I'm saying to you
that they don't see it as a battleground. I hear you.
Wait a second. They don't see it as a. Andrea, tell me truthfully, do you think Florida is still a battleground state? Florida is no longer a battleground state. That's the point that I think Democrats are having a hard time 2 days after the election coming to grips with. This is a red state. This is not a battleground state anymore. What candidate is going to try to take on, Rick Scott in 2 years, even if it's an open seat? That's the problem. Is I think that there isn't the recognition that this is no longer a battleground state.
I just absolutely disagree with you, Jim, because I think when you look at the history of Florida, we are the swingiest state. It's the state where Kerry loses by 5 and then Obama wins by 3. Like, historically, these kinds of swings are not unusual for a state like Florida. What we're seeing, it will be if there continues to be a refusal to invest. And I agree, like if they turn away from Florida, and we understand that there's no one coming to save us, like, we will never stop fighting for our families. We will never stop fighting for our communities. But the reality is that what just happened in 2022 and what happened in 2020 is that the national Democratic establishment made an intentional choice not to invest in Florida. There are years that you see supercharged Republican turnout and very lackluster Democratic turnout. And then there are years that flips. I mean, we had less people voting in 2022 than we had voting in 2018. And that says something.
We'll be right back.